Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Jessa Cipiao, your discussant for today. My topic is all about the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, or the Ipophyl. The subtopics that I am going to discuss is the overview of the intellectual property system and the Ipophyl history. What is Ipophyl? The Ipophyl is the government agency mandated to administer and implement state policies on intellectual property to strengthen the protection of IP rights in the country. What is intellectual property system? The intellectual property system relates to rights and obligations as well as privileges and incentives, all rooted from the creation and protection of IP, which refers to creations of the mind, invention, literary and artistic works, and symbols, names, and images used in commerce. Why do we need to promote and protect IP? There are several compelling reasons why do we need to promote and protect IP. So first, we have the progress and well-being of humanity rests on its capacity to create and invent new works in the areas of technology and culture. Second, the legal protection of new creations encourages the commitment of additional resources for further innovation. Third, the promotion and protection of intellectual property spurs economic growth, creates new jobs and industries, and enhances the quality and enjoyment of life, according to the World Intellectual Property Office publication. Brief history of Ipophyl. The Philippines' intellectual property system dates back well into the Spanish and American colonial periods, earning the Philippines the reputation as among the first Asian countries to adopt laws on intellectual property. The Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines, also signed into law 22 years ago, and became effective on January 1, 1998. It also existed before the country declared an independent state. This is the comprehensive structure and the history of the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines. Now let's go through how the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines became a law. In the year 1879, the Spanish law on intellectual property approved on January 10, 1879, and first known as the Copyright Law in the Philippines. In 1880, the Spanish law on intellectual property came into force. Under Spanish laws, copyright is named as a property right and governed by civil law, but with legislative provision. In the year 1896, following the outbreak of the Philippine Revolution and the defeat of Spain in the Spanish-American War, the Treaty of Paris was signed between the European country and the United States to formalize the end of hostility. Then in the year 1898, the Treaty of Paris, signed in December of 1898, ended 300 years of Spanish colonial rule in the Philippines and dictated the cessation of the Philippines in Guam from Spanish dominion to the American colonial order. In the year 1913, the Philippine legislature passed an Act number 2235 making United States patent laws applicable in the Philippines. In 1924, an Act number 3134 entitled An Act to Protect Intellectual Property was passed in 1924, making it the main intellectual property law in effect until after Philippine independence from the U.S. in 1945. An Act number 3134 was based on the U.S. copyright law of 19. In the year 1940s, the Philippines also entered into international conventions that laid out the foundations of the intellectual property system we know today. The Berne Convention for the Protection of Literary and Artistic Works in 1951, and the Rome Convention of International Convention for the Protection of Performers, Producers of Phonograms and Broadcasting Organizations in 1964. In the year 1947, the Philippines enacted two laws strengthening the IP system, the Republic Act 165 and Republic Act 176. establishing a patent office and allowing for registration and protection of trademarks, trade names, and service marks. The Republic Act 165 is an act creating a patent office, prescribing its powers and duties, regulating the issuance of patents and appropriating funds. However, the Republic Act 166 is an act to provide for the registration and protection of trademarks, trade names, and service marks, defining unfair competition, false marking, and providing remedies against the same and for other purposes. In 1980, the convention establishing the World Intellectual Property Organization, or the WIPO, came into force, of which the Philippines was already a signatory of since the 1960s. In 1987, the Philippine Constitution promulgated and recognized the importance of intellectual property in Article 14, Section 13, states that the state shall protect and secure the exclusive rights of scientists, inventors, artists, and other gifted citizens to their intellectual property and creations, particularly when beneficial to the people for such period may be provided by the law. In the year 1995, the Philippines progressively became a member of the global community. It also adhered to the Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights in 1995, following its entry into the World Trade Organization in the same year. In the year 1997, the Republic Act 8293, more known today as the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines, was signed into law by President Fidel V. Ramos on June 6, 1990. In the year 1998, the Intellectual Property Code was passed and enforced on January 1, 1998, which was authored by the late Senator Raul Is Ruco. As the conclusion of my report, the history of the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, or the Ipophyl, is the testament to the country's commitment to fostering innovation, creativity, and economic growth through resilient intellectual property laws and practices. From its roots in various government agencies to its establishment as the dedicated IP office in 1998, Ipophyl has evolved to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing global IP landscape. Here are my references. Thank you for listening.